So this paper, evaluating market research by maximising ROI, and ROI in this context means return on insights, by Peter Dorff and Charu Chaturvedi from Afinova. Now, Peter is currently Senior Portfolio Insight Manager at AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, where he's led US market research activities for several respiratory and cardiovascular brands. During his time with AZ, Peter's also worked in global regulatory affairs, and prior to that as a nuclear chemist, working on techniques to visualize candidate molecules and advance those with the greatest promise through to the clinic. Also, during his time with AZ and previously at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, Peter's published a number of papers, more than 20 papers in fact, and has 2 patents to his name in the field of nuclear medicine. He holds a BSc, an MSc, and also an MBA, so I think we can conclude he's an all-round very clever chap. Charu is Senior Vice President at Afinova, where she leads the Life Sciences team, dedicated to providing strategic insights and technology-driven solutions to clients in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device industries. Prior to Afinova, Charu worked as a marketing director at American Express and has also worked for General Electric. Throughout her career, she's demonstrated a passion for innovation and driving change in organizations. Indeed, she won the Chairman's Award for Innovation at Amex. This is the highest form of recognition within that company. Charu has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and an MBA from the Columbia Graduate School of Business. So I'll hand over to the 2 speakers now.
Thanks, Martin. It's 4:30 in the morning, so I don't know how clever I am at this hour, but please bear with me. So everybody wants to get more out of their market research efforts, right? We all want to deliver greater value to our teams. That's obvious because you're here today, right? But sometimes that's not as easy as we would like, right? Do we have all the tools in our toolkit to make this easy and facile? So that's what Charu and I are going to be talking to you about today. We're going to be talking about how we at AstraZeneca feel that we elevated the role that market research played in driving our decision-making process, right? And how we feel that we really got more return out of our insight dollars. So we're going to start by level setting on the role that research plays today in our decision-making, all right? And the objective here is to make you appreciate that you can go from an order taker, kind of test this, right? We want this, the marketers say, to more of a strategic partner that can drive more of that decision making and make sure that you have the most effective promotion out there. Charu's then going to walk through a case study that is very similar to the work that we did with Afinova at AstraZeneca, right? And then how you can measure ROI on this, how you can actually measure how much better your promotion is going to be using this approach. And then conclusions. All right. So you're all very familiar with this. This is the classic market research paradigm, oversimplified, right? But it all starts with the opportunity to develop a better promotion, right? And whether it's messaging, whether it's creative elements, whether it's a product profile, we have this opportunity as market researchers every day. Now you're going to start and follow up on that opportunity by exploring ideas, right? Generating inputs. And somewhere between the very long European vacations, conference travel to London, right, your awesome parental leave policies and stuff like that, you're going to actually find the time, maybe, to do some qualitative research. You're going to find some time on people's calendars, actually, to engage your agency partners, your medical, your marketing, R&D teams, right, to start putting together some ideas, right? And these ideas are around whatever facets of promotion you're trying to develop, right? Whether they're clinical endpoints, insight statements, benefit statements, creative imagery elements, whatever, right? And hopefully you're very successful in developing these ideas. albeit challenging, you're likely going to surprise yourself by generating more ideas than you originally expected you were going to actually generate, right? So here you pat yourself on the back and you say, hey, well done, Peter. And team, look, we've got all these ideas. That's fabulous, right? The thing is that we really don't have the time, the money, or the resources often to test these ideas. And short of actually waterboarding respondents, there's not too many people who are actually going to sit through a laborious hours and hours of evaluating 50 different clinical endpoint messages, right? So since that's not going to happen, you go back to your team and you say, okay, great work, guys. We put together tons of ideas. Fabulous. Now let's cut those down, right, to a more measurable, testable set. So we pitch out these, some of these ideas, a lot of these ideas, and we take that more measurable, testable set. We evaluate it with our customers. They narrow it down to a few better ideas, right? We pick and choose amongst those, and we develop, test, and tweak these ideas, and hopefully, cross our fingers, we've got something we can work with. Otherwise, next month or next year, we go back to that original pool of ideas, and we might start testing those, right? So eventually you're going to launch your promotion, right? You need to. Now the question you have to ask yourself as a market researcher is this the best promotion it could be, right? Potentially, you would have had a much better promotion had you evaluated all of those ideas you originally explored with your target customer, right? Not picking and choosing winners and losers with your internal teams, but actually evaluating them with your customer. How do we know we've got the best promotion out there, right? We don't, and we likely don't in many cases. So hopefully you appreciate that as a market researcher, the exploration and selection phases are really going to be critical to you optimizing the success and maximizing the opportunity of that promotion, right? You need to help your teams explore as many ideas as possible, right? You also need to help your teams involve the customer earlier on, as Tom was mentioning, in that selection process. And you have to ask yourself, have we really optimized these two phases to the full extent possible? We utilize research methods that go back, I don't know, decades and decades and decades. The 70s. I mean, we haven't really evolved too much beyond that. So if we're to overcome challenges, if we're actually to do things better, you have to wonder, can we keep on doing the same things we've been doing, right? Albert Einstein didn't think so. We might actually need to steal a page from somebody else. And as Martin pointed out, I used to be a chemist. Don't hold that against me, right? But chemists actually were at a place that market researchers were back in the 70s and 80s. They used to pick and choose one compound at a time, test it and evaluate it and stuff like that. No longer. Now when you start in the drug discovery process, you start with 1 million compounds. At minimum, like 900,000 would be what they would consider a testable set. And they screen these all against their target. They never pick and choose winners because they're actually bad predictors of success. Now, when you start with such a huge number of ideas up front, you actually need a very small hit rate to generate a lot of great ideas, okay? And they never take and throw these great compounds out into a clinical trial and spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Before they do that, they always benchmark what they've got against their competitors' best and their own internal best, right? To have those go decisions to actually lead to, great and better drugs than we have today. So the analogy for us as market researchers is we need to help our teams generate more ideas. Today, there's collaborative technology that can help you, to some extent, work around all of those vacations and meetings and stuff like that. We need to help foster idea development amongst our teams. And we need to test all of these ideas with our target customers to identify the best of the best, not the best of the worst, which might happen if we use our own internal teams to make decisions. And then lastly, benchmark what you've got. There's no need to actually throw out and spend millions of dollars promoting something that's not going to be better or more optimal than what you've got today or than what your competitors are promoting, right? You can do better. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charu, and she's going to walk through a case study that talks about the work that we kind of did with Afanova at AstraZeneca.
Thank you, Peter. So as Peter laid out this framework, I'm going to take you through an actual case study that brings it to life. It's similar to the type of work we did with Peter. Obviously, we can't share the actual data of that project work, but it's a recent Alzheimer's entry into the market. There's disappointing launch uptake in the market. It's not meeting the internal forecasts. There's a competitor that's entering the market. And at the same time, there's some new clinical information that's coming out that might point the team into a different direction. So right now, the Connextra team, which is the name of the drug, is thinking about a number of different questions. There's the physician insight statement. What are the unmet needs in the market? There's things around the mechanism of action. Should we articulate it differently? How do we make it more compelling? What's relevant to our audience? Efficacy, safety types of endpoints. How do we articulate them best? How do we potentially prioritize them in our promotional materials to be most effective? Things like campaign headline. What's really going to wrap the whole thing up in a more powerful way? There's also things like benefits. Should we go more emotional, more rational, or some combination of the two? And certainly visual imagery. So these are the typical kinds of questions that your marketing teams have when they're considering a refresh or even a launch in the market. Often the way that we handle this is a very linear, sequential type of process to handle each one, sometimes individually. With technology, though, you can actually combine a lot of these questions into the same analysis. So when you look at this starting point concept or combination, what we've basically done is taken all of those open questions and turn them into a category or an element. And you can see all of them represented here in this holistic format. And this is great because this is actually more reminiscent of what your end customers see in the market. They don't evaluate an efficacy point just by itself. They see it in conjunction with the rest of the materials you provide them. So this is an attempt to get more realistic in the type of communication that you're already doing with your physicians. Now, Peter mentioned the fact that from an exploratory phase, there's lots of places that you go to generate ideas, and there can be a lot of ideas that come through. One thing that we've looked at is how to collaborate more effectively. So because of so many advances in the online world and technology, there are some amazing collaboration softwares out there, some platforms out there. This one is available 24/7, completely web-based, and the idea is that for you, often the linchpin between a number of your cross-functional team members, whether they're marketing, agency, regulatory, med affairs, it's a chance to actually herd all the cats, to bring together all of those ideas and truly collaborate with each other to build off of the ideas that you have. So this actually shows you an example of it. We basically took that initial starting point concept, which in this case represented the actual communication in market, the main elements of that communication. Now, if you go in here, let's say the insight statement that's being currently used to fuel the positioning platform in the market, maybe there's alternatives to this. So now you can actually, you or your team members could go in and actually start to add in different variations to that insight statement. This could be inspired by qualitative focus groups that you're doing. This could simply be inspired by just good old brainstorming. Peter might put something down. It might make me think of something. I might add a different variation to that. And all of a sudden, there's actually 11 different potential insight statements. And you can see the same thing happening across the board. Campaign headline, efficacy statements, safety statements. Any of these elements, any of these business questions that you have, these are potential alternative answers, all the way through the imagery. And when you look in the upper right-hand corner, what you may have noticed happening is that the number of combinations now starts to expand almost exponentially. When you introduce 11 different insight statements combined with 9 different campaign headlines, already you've got about 99 different variations or combinations that you could potentially explore. And I know that number sounds quite large, but when you actually look at the individual components here, this is very realistic in terms of the ideas that your teams are coming up with that they ideally would like to test and understand what is truly the best combination.
So no one's going to develop, like drug discovery scientists, 900,000 ideas, right? But this approach has actually enabled our teams to much more easily actually plug in ideas, right? So everyone, in some regards, starts writing more copy and marketing messages, which actually is a really good way to enable that divergent thinking that we want to have.
And this is, again, this is the internal process. This is what you do already today in a series of emails and phone calls and Excel spreadsheets. It's a way to herd those cats so that you understand what is the innovation space you're actually testing. Now, again, this just kind of summarizes across these different categories, you have 64 different ideas. All in all, when you look at all the combinations, it's over 18 million. So now the question becomes, how do we actually vet this effectively with our respondents? And that's where technology plays a big role, because more traditional methods will not allow you to do so. So let's talk about how that works. It's based using evolutionary algorithms. And the idea is it's online entirely. Respondents come in to the survey based on whatever target criteria. In this case, Peter would define who it is he wants to talk to. They come into the survey. And what they're presented with is an evolutionary exercise where there's a choice set page. On the choice set page are 4 concepts. It could be any of those 18 million concepts. There's no design of experiments. Peter and I did not sit down and decide, here are the 18 we're going to show them and then triangulate on the back end. They can literally see any of those 18 million that they want. It's really their journey. They're presented with a governing question and they make selections. And the beauty of evolution and algorithms, when you combine them, is that it becomes real time. You're actually able to evolve the concept in real time based on those preferences that were indicated. So let me show you an example. This is the choice set page. You can see 4 concepts, 2 up top, 2 at the bottom, so it's a paired comparison to make it easier for the respondent to really make choices. And when you think of things around behavioral economics and how whether they're physicians or patients or just human beings make decisions, it's very quick. It's using heuristics. It's very fast. It's not an over-examination of every element. It's basically comparing alternatives and making a selection. Simple choice tasks, not overtaxing or interrogating the respondent. So here they mouse over, compare the options, make a selection. The 3rd concept moves into place. They do the same thing. The 4th concept moves into place, and now they've made their final selection on this choice set page. Now what happens here is the next choice set page starts to load up. And in this process, those concepts that you see here could vary for every single respondent because they're not part of a design of experiments. It's not a conjoint analysis. It's a learning model. So these are actually evolving in real time, taking into account the preferences that were indicated on the prior choice set page. So a simplified version of this, if you look at the left-hand side, you can see preferred concepts. And again, it's concepts. It's holistic. It's the entire bundle, not just one element. And it's very Darwinian. It's evolution, after all. So preferred aspects of that concept are being brought forward to breed a new concept, which will be shown again and again and again. So there's this massively iterative process at play. Now, at the same time, there's something that doesn't actually exist in nature. We call it random jumps. This allows us to periodically bring back discarded variants, things that were not preferred early on. Now, in qualitative or other methods, you might throw that out entirely. But the beauty of this massively iterative process is you actually can bring it back for 2 reasons. One, you want to simply keep checking, is this preferred or not? But more importantly, the ability to account for interaction effects. You may find certain elements die away because they're just not sitting with the right surroundings. So the ability, especially in messaging and visuals, to really account for those synergies and interactions can lead you to a much more powerful platform or promotional materials in the market. Now, if you think about this in the aggregate, you've got all these respondents coming in. Again, they can see any of the 18 million possible combinations. It's not adaptive conjoint, which is just like conjoint. It's not about asking them self-stated questions to whittle down what they see. It's about really allowing them to pick their adventure. And basically, they come in and they start to see different combinations. They start to make selections. Things combine. They recombine. They fall away. Random jumps happens. Eventually, you reach steady state. And because we're humans and there are always similar preferences in some cases, we do reach steady state and often concept clusters form. And these concept clusters really represent concepts that are very similar and preferred by a group of people that continuously selected them. So for each of these clusters, we can identify the top concept or top combination that best represents that cluster. And underlying each one of these clusters is the segment that evolved it. Now, that segment may match up incredibly well to your going-in hypotheses about who the segments are, who the physician specialties are, who the countries are, but you may also find that it doesn't match up, that in fact this is the natural segmentation in the market. This is a segmentation based on the context of what you're testing, and that can be also incredibly insightful. So the tangible representation of these concepts is, as you can see here, different combinations of that initial set of information that you tested. So now we talk about what to do next. So now you've got the best of the best. You've collaborated effectively internally. You've optimized with your actual customers, not using any subjective judgment. You've got the best of the best. Now you move into the business phase. Well, let's make a decision. What's actually going to move the needle? So now you want to benchmark those top concepts or optimized concepts against the other alternatives that you're comparing. In this case, the pre-optimized concept represented what's currently in the market that you want to make the case to refresh. It could also represent, if you were doing a brand new launch, the internal thinking, the gut thinking. It could represent any concepts or combinations coming from other methods. And then you also want to bring in your competitive set. Who else is in the market? What do you anticipate potentially coming in the market, so that you can make an educated and informed decision. So we go out to a different panel of people because we don't want to have biased results, because we don't want people who have optimized their best choice to then evaluate that. So we take those top concepts and do a monadic and a discrete choice analysis. Now with the monadic, as you all know, it's showing that concept in isolation. So often it's considered the industry standard, but it's really giving you a breadth of appeal measure. So often clients complain that there's a lot of noise, not a lot of discrimination. It's very hard to pick winners. In discrete choice, it's a much more robust analysis. It's where you're actually comparing different concepts against each other, again, getting to a more realistic choice. So what you can then see from an end deliverable is in this benchmarking phase, this go, no-go decision phase, on the y-axis you've got the monadic scores. On the x-axis you've got the discrete choice indexed utility scores. Orange is the top concepts coming from the optimization. Gray are the competitors that the client, and in this case Peter, decided to include. And blue is the pre-optimized concept, in this case what's already in the market. So if you just look across the y-axis and the scoring there, you can probably see my point about monadics, where there is a lot of noise, a lot of overlapping error bars. It would be hard to identify which one actually outperforms. If you look across the x-axis, though, you can see very clearly top concept 1 and 2 in this case are really separating out from the pack. And the nice thing about this is you can quantify this now. You can actually look at top concept 2 and quantify what the improvement is or the preference is for that versus the pre-optimized concept. In this case, there's a 40% greater likelihood of that top concept 2 being chosen over the pre-optimized concept. That becomes very powerful. That becomes the backbone of a business case to go to upper management and say, we really need to refresh, and this is how we need to do it. We're seeing a tremendous, we're able to move the needle quite a bit in being able to do this.
So Charu and Afanova, they gave us, or we had 18 million different possible stories, 18 million different possible promotions, right? And what they gave us was 3 top concepts, right? So very easy to make decisions in terms of what to move forward with. But here, if you take a look at this map, and these are our scores, you see top concept 1 and 2. We went with top concept 2. We actually went with top concept 1 as well because it was so successful. Now, we typically do not benchmark ourselves against the positioning of other competitors in the market, right? It's maybe something of a safe face mentality. You try to develop the best that you can without necessarily seeing how you do to competitors, right? Now, in this case, you can see our pre-optimized concept does not beat the competitors, right? But what they handed us was something that beat the competitors. And having this is, as Charu said, very important for leadership to get back and support whatever decisions you are making.
And just going back to the theme of this discussion, it's return on insight. So how do you actually demonstrate that the function of insights, the function of market research, can actually drive better promotions, better decisions in the market? And this is a great example of that. Now, when we talk about how do we systematically do this, we've actually looked across a number of projects that we've done, the last 100, and compared On average, how did those top concepts do in each one of those studies against the client-provided pre-optimized concept? And those pre-optimized concepts are generally coming from more traditional methods, whether it's qualitative, conjoint, discrete choice. And again, this is not saying that those methods are not useful. They're useful for very important things, either generating ideas or measuring them. But that function of optimization, which gives you top concepts, is a completely customer-centric driven process. And what you can see here is, on average, the improvement of the top concepts over that pre-optimized concept is 60%. And that's average. I mean, it ranges from 14 to 233% when you actually look at the indices. That's extremely powerful. And the idea here is, how do we as market researchers make better informed, efficacious decisions about what we take forward? And how can we actually start to use technology that enables us to leapfrog what we've been doing, as a proxy, because we didn't necessarily have a step that was, captured in true optimization. And I'll hand it over to Peter to kind of summarize what we've talked about, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right. The role of the market researcher is getting complex, right? You need to adapt to complex challenges. The organization also expects you to deliver more every single day. Now, the good news is that you've got additional tools in your toolbox that you didn't have in 1970, right? So using something like the AFANOVA model really does help. Now, if you can get your team essentially behind developing more ideas earlier on, that's going to help you develop a better promotion, right? Engaging the customer in that decision-making process earlier is also going to help in you getting the best promotion you can get, right? And also developing these ideas and these promotions holistically, not as discrete individual clusters of messages, will also help in making you deliver a better promotion. Now, I think we have one other AstraZeneca attendee here. So I'm speaking to you, use this method. To the other competitors out there, you could take it or leave it. But thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Charu, Peter. That was really interesting, really insightful. We have time for a couple of questions. In fact, he finished speaking as it went to 0 on the countdown timer. So that's great. Question?
Very simple question. How long does the whole process take? And how many people did you involve, customers did you involve in the process?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the survey length is between 21 and 25 minutes, and that includes the Evolutionary exercise, which is 16 choice sets. It also includes a screener and a post-exercise survey afterward. Usually, on average, we have about an N size of 300 respondents. That enables us to get to convergence or steady state. And that 300 can be made up of different subgroups of an N of 75. So if you're looking at multiple physician specialties or multiple countries, there are different ways to get to that 300.
Another question?
Yeah, good presentation, thank you. One question, were you able to ultimately link the return on insights to the performance of the product in the market? Were you able to see the improvement, let's say, with the launch of new campaign, to then go back to management and say, in hindsight, this is really, we've taken it all away? Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the share of voice that we had with this promotion, given that it broke through much more so than the last promotion that we had out there, we did see a measurable increase in the share of voice numbers amongst our physician population, despite the fact that our promotional efforts with that group had not changed. And, the company's sticking with the promotion based on the success of this study. But they're actually running another one at this point in time. So this kind of information is from a study that was done just over a year ago, and we are refreshing that. So we'll see if we can actually beat what we've got out in market today. And of course, it just becomes harder and harder as you raise your own bar. So in a way, this year might be tougher than last.
And one comment I'll make, in the pharma industry, it is, longer lead times, longer feedback loops. It does take time to get that performance back to, the slide that we showed. In other verticals that we have, especially, FMCG, where it's easier to tag performance back. We've actually looked at the industry standards versus the products that we've worked on and seen a doubling of both product launches and success in the market. So that's where we've been able to tie that market performance factor more clearly.
Okay, one last question, Catherine.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for it being a case study. Very much respect that. My question actually builds on the last one, which is about how to measure impact. And I wondered, within your methodology, there's another piece of it that says not only are these chosen messages, but there is a bias for action in some way, whether it be intent to use more, or some other more imaginative kind of bias for action measurement.
And do you mean in the actual study? Yeah. The governing question that we use can be completely customizable. So it really comes down to, what is your intent? Are you trying to obviously outperform what you have in the market? Are you trying to increase? So that governing question can be modified to try and get to a different measure. When we do the separate measurement phase, where you do the monadic and the discrete choice, again, we can actually add in a sequential question. So to your point, you can get more refinement of the data, more commitment level, but everything is going to be in the context of a market research capacity, where everything is operating on a level playing field. So we do the best we can within that confine, but we can absolutely adjust the question you're asking to understand the intent or the motivation that you're trying to tap into.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll move now to the voting bit.
I feel like I'm on American Idol.
So yeah, we need to ask you to use the keypad to give this paper a score between 1 and 9. Obviously 9 is high, 1 is low. Just need to push the button once, and that's sufficient. So please vote now.
All right.
Just hang on to. Okay, thank you. There's coffee now being served, but perhaps more importantly, there's also a number of author-presented posters, the Young Professionals poster session, and I would encourage you to go and watch and listen to some of these, because they are extremely good, extremely interesting. And then following coffee, there are 2 more parallel sessions to choose from, one from the Hall & Partners team and one from DVL Smith and Astellas Pharma Europe. Thanks very much.